Most tiny homes on YouTube show you a cute box with a loft bed and call it a day. What nobody shows you is how an L-shaped floor plan can actually give you 2 full bedrooms, real privacy, and a layout that does not feel like camping. Today we are touring a 2026 L-shaped tiny home that solves the biggest complaint people have about tiny living. No space for guests, no space for kids, no space for a home office. By the end of this video, you will know exactly why this layout works, where it falls short, and whether it is worth the extra square footage. Stick around, because the last section breaks down the real cost per square foot compared to a standard rectangular tiny home, and that number might change your mind about which shape to build. Before we get into the walkthrough, if you're seriously considering tiny home living or just love smart small space design, hit subscribe to Home Intel. We are not sponsored by any builder or brand, so everything you see here is our honest read on what works and what is not. Now, let us get into the tour. Why L-shape changes everything. Most tiny homes are built as a single rectangle, usually on a trailer between 20 and 34 feet long. That shape forces every room into a straight line, which means bedrooms often share a wall with the living room, and sound travels everywhere. An L-shaped design breaks that rectangle into 2 wings. One wing holds a main living, kitchen, and bathroom. The second wing, the base of the L, becomes a dedicated bedroom wing. This single change is why L-shaped layouts are gaining traction in 2026, especially for couples, roommates, or small families who need actual separation between sleeping and living spaces. It is also why more designers are moving away from the straight rectangle as a default and treating the L shape as a serious option for anyone planning to live in a tiny home full-time rather than use it as a weekend getaway. The floor plan breakdown. This particular home sits at 420 square feet, which is larger than the typical 200 to 300 square foot tiny home, but still well under the average American home. The main wing includes a kitchen, a full bathroom, and an open living and dining area. The second wing, set at an angle off the main structure, contains 2 separate bedrooms, each with its own door. That door is a detail most tiny homes skip. A door means privacy, noise control, and the ability to close off a space completely, something a curtain or open loft can never really deliver. If you're watching the floor plan graphic on screen right now, you can see exactly how the 2 wings meet at that center point, which is where a lot of the design decisions in this home actually happen. Bedroom 1 walkthrough. The primary bedroom sits at the far end of the L, giving it the most distance from the kitchen and living noise. It fits a queen-size bed, a small built-in closet, and a window seat that doubles as storage. The window placement here matters more than people realize. Because the bedroom sits at the corner of the L, it gets light from 2 directions instead of 1, which makes a small room feel noticeably larger during the day. This is one of those details that does not show up in listing photos, but makes a real difference once you are actually living in the space day to day. Bedroom 2 walkthrough. The second bedroom is smaller, built for a single occupant or a child, and includes a fold-down desk that turns the space into a home office when needed. This flexibility is important because most tiny home buyers in 2026 are not just looking for a vacation cabin. They are looking for a primary residence that can adapt as their needs change. A room that works as a bedroom today and an office tomorrow adds real long-term value, especially with remote and hybrid work still shaping how people choose where and how they live. Kitchen and living space. The main wing keeps the kitchen galley style, running along one wall to save floor space. Counter space is limited compared to a standard home, roughly 6 feet of usable counter, so storage relies heavily on vertical cabinetry. The living area seats for comfortably using a small sectional, which is a step up from the single love seat you see in most tiny home tours. The trade-off is that the dining table is fixed and small, seating only 2 to 3 people at once. So if you regularly host larger groups, this is a space you will need to plan around rather than expect the home to solve for you. Bathroom and plumbing placement. The bathroom sits at the junction of the 2 wings, which is a smart placement choice since it keeps plumbing lines short and centralized. It includes a full shower, not just a wet bath, which is a meaningful upgrade for anyone planning to live here full-time rather than use it as a weekend retreat. Centralizing the bathroom at that junction point does more than simplify the layout. Shorter plumbing runs mean less pipe, less labor time for crew installing it, and fewer places where a leak can happen later. In a build this size, that kind of efficient plumbing placement can meaningfully reduce both material and labor costs, which is a detail worth noticing if you're comparing quotes from different builders. What this layout sacrifices. No layout is perfect, and honesty about the trade-offs is what separates a real review from a sales pitch. The L shape requires a wider parking or foundation footprint than a straight rectangle, which limits where this home can legally sit, especially in areas with strict lot size rules for accessory dwelling units. The angled hallway connecting the two wings also eats into usable square footage. Roughly 30 square feet is lost purely to circulation space that would not exist in a straight design. On the floor plan graphic, that lost space is highlighted in red, so you can see exactly where it disappears to. It is a small area on paper, but over the life of owning this home, that is 30 square feet you are paying to build, heat, and maintain without ever actually living in it. Transport and zoning reality. Here is something most tiny home content skips entirely. An L-shaped footprint generally cannot be towed as a single unit, like a standard 28-foot tiny home on wheels. Getting this shape built usually means site-built construction, a modular or panelized assembly process, or joining two separate chassis together once they arrive on site. If you are planning to buy a tiny home and move it across the country whenever you want, this layout is not built for that lifestyle. It is much better suited to a permanent or semi-permanent placement, which matters a lot of mobility, was part of why you wanted a tiny home in the first place. Cost comparison. This is a section that actually matters if you are deciding whether an L shape is worth it. A standard rectangular tiny home in this size range typically runs between $180 and $220 per square foot, depending on finishes. This L-shaped build comes in closer to $210 to $250 per square foot. The increase comes from the additional framing complexity at the angled junction and the extra exterior wall length, since an L shape has more perimeter wall per square foot of interior space than a rectangle does. More exterior wall means more framing, more siding, more insulation, and more roof flashing, and all of that adds up. On a 420 square foot home, that difference can add an extra $12,000 to $15,000 to the total build cost. Is it worth the extra cost? For a single person or a couple without guests, probably not. A standard rectangular layout will save money and still deliver a comfortable home. But for two people who need separate bedrooms, a couple with one child, or anyone planning to work from home part-time, the L-shape earns its price difference. The privacy, the flexibility, and the ability to close a door and actually separate your life from your work are difficult to replicate in a single straight floor plan, and that is the honest trade-off to weigh before committing to this design. If you are choosing between the two, the real question is not which one is cheaper. It is which one matches how you actually plan to live day to day. The L-shaped tiny home is not the cheapest option, and it is not the simplest to build, but it solves a real problem that a lot of tiny home buyers run into after move-in, the lack of true separate spaces. If privacy and flexibility matter more to you than shaving a few $1,000s off the build, this layout is worth serious consideration in 2026, especially if you're planning to live in it full-time rather than treat it as a weekend escape. That is a full tour and the honest breakdown of what an L-shaped two-bedroom tiny home actually costs and delivers. If this helped you think through your own tiny home plans, subscribe to Home Intel for more unsponsored, straight-to-the-point home design content. Let us know in the comments whether you would choose an L shape or a straight rectangle for your build, and we will see you in the next one.